No, I feel like we're gonna puke, dude. I can't keep doing this to myself. I can't. Something's gotta change, brother.
And views art not as a means to express what it means to exist, but instead that sees the value of creation just
Is it supposed to be doing that?
Yeah, it's like his whole shtick.
Alright.
Hello and welcome to Wish for Death Island, Population Me. Also, since this is on the subject of horror, I figured that I'd bring up my shop channel. I started a new series where I'm doing my shop stuff as the visuals and then talking about the last meals on death row and then making the food, doing a bit of baking, providing some recipes. If you're into that sort of thing, maybe you'll like it.
If you're not aware, Wendigoon is a...
What is BreadTube? BreadTube is the name for the left-wing sphere of video essays, where they talk about things from the perspective of usually extremely left-wing politics. It's actually kind of a derogatory term in the way that I use it, for example, because it describes people who are so brain-rotted on politics that they think that everything is political, and if you're not as extremely left as them, you're a Nazi or a bad person in general. As an artist in particular, I hate the notion that all art is political and I absolutely reject it, but that doesn't stop people from really pushing hard that every single piece of art is somehow political, and they'll bring up some stupid political notion that they've applied to a piece of art. It's kind of like a gotcha. Like, oh, you were enjoying this burger eating art, even though it's just like clearly a joke about being a Burger King and enjoying food. It's like, oh, it's actually about consumerism, by the way, haha, everything you love is political, like, I don't know. So, for example, this is my shop mascot, Tubb Tubb. He is an onion who loves dancing and adventuring with his friends. I drew him because he's cute and he makes me happy. I drew his friends because they're cute and they make me happy. I'm drawing a manga and comics of them and digital magazines of them because it makes me happy. You can try and do a gotcha on me and like apply some sort of political standing to why I like drawing vegetables and fruit and like nature things, but I don't really care. I'm just doing it because it makes me happy and I want to show it to other people so that they can be happy. It doesn't have to be political. Even if you try and force something political onto it, I'm not going to accept it because it's just not that way to me. Anyways, a breadtuber by the name of In Praise of Shadows decided to make a video titled Bad Conservative Horror and proceeded to shit-talk a bunch of people he disagreed with as bad people because they're different than him and a lot of them are more successful than him.
He is friends with Oompaville, a gun-obsessed content creator that has taken advantage of Nakado Avocado's mental decline for fame and for money, and on top of that has made content with the human trafficker Andrew Tate. He is friends with Mutahar, who argued against Andrew Tate being deplatformed from social media websites, and has recently showcased a great deal of transphobia in his most recent video.
No, I feel like we're gonna puke,
interacted
dude.
in a
I can't keep
way
doing
with
this
the
to myself.
Rock Solid
I
on
can't.
multiple occasions.
Something's gotta
and with
change,
just a
brother.
quick look at their
Usually, I leave BreadTube alone because they're exhausting, they're boring. Generally, my content is about meme-filled, low-hanging fruit for the purpose of entertainment, and I acknowledge this, I'm totally fine with it. So I never really cared about trying to keep up with the way that these people twist language and act like they're smarter than everyone else, because it's just kind of boring to me. However, I'm making this video because iPots, as we'll call him, is a horror YouTuber, and I am a massive horror fan myself. It's my favorite genre, so I do feel personally invested in defending horror from politics brain rot. My stance, right at the beginning, is that horror, as any other genre, should be something that is not inherently political. You can make your horror piece political if you want to, as an individual, but you can't force that shit on others. I have a bunch of horror stories that I've written already, and I'm planning to write even more because that's just something that I enjoy, and none of them are political. I'm just writing stuff that I feel is cool, and stuff that's based on the dreams and nightmares that I've had. But someone like IPOS thinks that makes me beneath him because I'm not elevated enough to do sophisticated horror, which, weirdly enough, is the kind of horror that displays the correct politics. Let's get into that. I only even saw that this existed because Jay Longbone went live and talked about it. We stan JLB in this house, so you should check out her VOD. Also, Aiden Paladin made a video like yesterday about the academia side of things as usual, which is very insightful and more on par with how to debunk stuff that BreadTube comes up with, which is not what I'm going to do. I'm going to call him a retard over and over again with funny music playing. He begins the video talking about how a horror convention he went to was super redneck and weird, and the fact that they had Kevin Spacey as one of the people invited to the con made him initially very skeptical of it.
I traveled to Concord, North Carolina to attend this year's Mad Monster Party, which was far and away the most redneck and unprofessional convention that I had ever been to in my life. The reason for my visit was due to a large amount of negative attention that the convention had received surrounding their headlining guest of honor, the alleged rapist, Kevin Spacey.
Now, you know, Spacey is creepy, so it's not like I'm trying to defend him there. I'm bringing this up for a very specific reason. iPost talks about how Kevin Spacey is an alleged rapist, and this is the opening of the video. This is his setup for conservative horror movies. It's basically like he's trying to associate the people that he doesn't like, not only as all conservatives, when I don't think that they are, but also the same as like being associated with an alleged rapist, because the rightoids are bad. So it's like convention brings Kevin Spacey for a horror thing, and because they're associated with an alleged rapist, they're bad. So if you like conservative horror movies, conservatives are bad people, so you're basically like someone who's associated with a rapist. He also makes it seem like Spacey was anti-women and fails to mention the fact that for Spacey it was gay rape. Now, obviously, in general, that's pretty bad. It doesn't matter what the gender is here, but like, he's trying to paint a specific angle that is not entirely accurate, and I think that that's very disrespectful to everyone involved. He says that the convention knew what they were doing, so they hid Spacey in their publicity, in the banners, in the billboards, and that kind of thing, but to me, if they had Spacey and they knew what they were doing because they wanted to cause controversy, wouldn't they specifically make more ads with him in it? Wouldn't they put him on the billboards and stuff because they knew that he was a headliner that was going to attract a lot of publicity to them?
Spacey is, in any sense of public optics, a very dumb idea, and you could try to write these people off as just straight up morons, but they fully understood what they were doing, as on all of their public advertisements, they just happened to forget to include Spacey along with all of the faces of the other big guests.
I would assume that the inclusion of Spacey would be to deliberate, like he says they know what they're doing, so they hid him. Wouldn't it be they know what they're doing, they want to invite controversy? I don't, like, this part already makes me think I don't connect with him.
Bold has been located. Bold alarm. Alerta, egg has been located. He also laments about having to walk a lot to get there, and he makes a comment about how ableist it is to walk around to get to the venue from the overflowing parking lot. I mean, yes, they could have had a couple lights here and there to point out where the overflow parking was if that was like the arrangement. Like, it does seem a bit shoddy, but like, it doesn't seem so catastrophic like he's making it out.
And they gave me directions to their overflow parking area that upon arrival I realized was well over half a mile away from the event, and that they had arranged no shuttle services whatsoever, meaning that I had to walk down a dirt trail that had large rocks in it in the February cold to get back to their main building, which, you know, was fine for me. I'm in relatively good health, but you can't expect all guests who want to attend your public event to be able to physically do that. When I finally got inside to purchase a weekend ticket at the front desk, they tried to put a paper wristband on me. They instead expected me to wear this paper wristband at all times for 3 days straight.
He complains a bunch and then says, I'm not here to make complaints like that because I'm not a fatty, but other people are. That's why I'm complaining on their behalf. I'm not a fatty though.
I'm not someone to ever actually make a complaint about something like that, but the reality of the situation is that not providing shuttle services to guests who can't walk when you make them park so far away immediately makes you seem totally unprofessional.
He also complains about the wristband ticket thing that they expected him to wear for 3 days. He says he couldn't use the ticket to come in with a new wristband. He had no printed schedule and you had to find out via the website, which honestly seems kind of normal. His serious tones about such minor inconveniences makes it sound like something terrible happened, and it's not just a shitty, inconvenient style of convention that he went to. He carries that kind of tone throughout the video, so when he talks about anything serious with the same tone, it builds the association with you that the minor inconvenience is the same as the big issues. For example, the fact that Kevin Spacey is an alleged rapist is gonna be a serious thing, obviously, but then coupled with the fact that some of the convention was a bit disorganized, how is that the same level of severity? He does this again when he talks about, like, things that he doesn't like later and never getting to the title of the video, where he's like, oh, this person has a disagreement with me on an issue, therefore it's just as catastrophic as Kevin Spacey being an alleged rapist.
You are stupid. Yes, I know, that's insulting, but it's also the truth.
Anyways, he goes on to say that there were no food or places to get food, which is inconvenient, but he's acting like he almost starved in the desert. I guess he's thinking about the fatties again. Spacey was there because it was a classic horror-themed convention using Seven as a motif. So he asks why Kevin Spacey was there since he's not a horror actor, and then answers his own question immediately.
The argument should be made that even if the past 10 years of his life had not happened, should Kevin Spacey himself be the headlining guest at a horror convention in the first place? Most people, if you ask them what horror movies Spacey had been in, would probably space on an answer, which that answer being is that he has been in exactly one horror film, Seven, which was the primary visual theme of the convention, as they really emphasized that they had gotten Spacey as a guest by having all of the staff at the convention being marked by having these bright red shirts on them that read, "What's in the box?" The photo ops with him were a staged event with a desert.
He also calls Facebook a not political platform, even though it's Facebook. He also was like, by the way, one of the people that called out the convention for having Spacey as their guest was a drag queen that was blocked online.
They reportedly began to block anyone who said something negative about their decision or the convention, one of which was the drag queen Naomi Monroe.
Who cares about what the drag queen said? You're already describing the grievances that people had with this convention. I don't know why you have to specifically point out, by the way, one of them was a drag queen? Like, as if that gives them credence, like extra credence, like, oh, sorry, drag queen, I should believe everything you're saying automatically. Who cares? This guy and other breadtubers act like everything revolves around how they are seen in the eyes of others and how many points that they have for, like, validation. And it's so annoying, like, I don't care that one of the people who was talking about it was a drag queen. I don't care that someone who was saying something about the convention was a woman, and then they said no to a woman. Oh my goodness, like, who cares? He also uses this example of the convention inviting an alleged rapist as a way to make a statement on hiring someone without checking what their political views are when you hire them for your job, or separating the art from the artist is the same thing. As if you're endorsing rape because the person that you hired is like just disagrees with things that you might agree with when they're off the clock.
You are stupid.
It's that kind of cancel culture, guilt by association thing that is just such a Twitter talking point. I don't know why anyone takes it seriously. And then he wraps it all up to say that another horror YouTuber showed up to the event and had a great time because he was just doing his own thing, and his video reflected his own experience instead of IPOS's experience, and that makes IPOS very mad because he wasn't as miserable as IPOS was.
All of this just works.
Now he talks about his major issue for the entire video. He says that there are two horror communities, one that he likes and one that he dislikes. The one that he dislikes is bad and full of rapists. I mean, you know, he didn't actually say that, but I'm kind of inferring. And, you know, things he disagrees with. And the one that he likes is himself and his friends. He says that his side loves art and doesn't do it for the money. They're full of integrity, and their elevated commentary is all about the society that we live in and how that's so much better. And the ones that he doesn't like are all about money and doesn't have any deep opinion. So they're all right-wing. Like, on the surface, you can definitely say that you like elevated horror, like horror that is taking concepts and doing something interesting with them or has like some other deeper meaning to it. That doesn't have to be political. I can think of a lot of non-political horror movies that do that kind of thing. So that in and of itself, saying that there's like a type of horror that's like purely as a cash grab, like a jump scare fest, that makes sense that they're, you know, good and bad horror. But obviously the whole fact of the matter is he's making this as a political statement because he thinks that all horror that is maybe deep and elevated, but has a message that he disagrees with, is no longer deep and elevated because the person who made it, their experience is invalid because they disagree with IPOS. Therefore, it's a cash grab, they're evil, and probably right-wing, even though that's not even necessarily true.
Dichotomy between our two experiences, and I think there's something interesting in that. And this ties into this theory that I've had for a long time that is kind of the thesis of this video, and that I think there's actually not one, but two distinct horror communities that do not overlap. One that is more concerned with writing and thinking about how our own experiences and world are reflected through art. A group that overall is less concerned with how much a movie makes at the box office and more with what it is trying to say as a work of art, and how it relates to ourselves and culture as people. And then you have another that is more conservative and traditionally capital A American, and is based more in basic consumerism, and viewing movies strictly as entertainment and nothing else. A group that often gets angry at the very notion of subtext existing within a work of fiction, and views art not as a means to express what it means to exist, but instead that sees the value of creation just within the context of how fun an experience that product is. And product is the right word here, as this side of horror is obsessed with money and defending companies, and even when putting on a mask of pretending to be left-leaning, everything that they do is in the service of capital and big business.
But the people are retarded.
An example that he later brings up is Late Night with the Devil, which he labels as conservative horror, and he insinuates that it's meaningless, which is how I know he doesn't have any media literacy. Firstly, there's nothing outwardly political about this film. It is a movie about a man facing his own demons on the backdrop of a 70s analog horror fake documentary about a late night show. It is genuinely one of the best horror movies I've seen in the last decade, and I want everyone to watch it. Please support this type of horror, it is really good. Having a backdrop being a time period like the 70s is not an automatic condemnation or endorsement of a time period. It's just an interesting way that you can choose to have your film look like. It's a setting. You can choose to comment on the setting at your leisure in your own story, and you're gonna have a nuanced take on it. Because yes, sometimes like a time period will have something very egregious going on, but then there might be aspects of it that you like the fashion or something. It's just something that you personally have to comment on if you choose to do so in your story, and it's going to be a lot more nuanced than, you know, the 70s was a great time or the 70s was horrible. It's going to be a mix. The only way that automatically setting your story in a time period is like endorsing everything about the time period is if you're a retard who thinks that everything is political. That's it. Also, another point. These people will oftentimes think that including something in your work is an endorsement if they don't like you. For example, there's a lot of movies about black people facing some sort of abuse, and if the author is a left-wing person that falls in line, this movie is a brave showcase about the effects of racism. But if the person is not falling in line, this is some sort of endorsement and a torture fest for all the white people watching to see a black person suffer on screen. It reminds me a bit of how back in the day, Anita Sarkeesian would always talk about how like women shouldn't be seen as sitting very femininely because it's like weakening, or if they sit too masculine then it's seen as them trying to be a man, and like nothing was ever good for her. But then when she was talking about her own character for a video game, it was exactly the same traits. It's just that she's in the right group, she's in the correct group, so when she does the exact same thing it makes sense. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not what you do, it's what side you're on. You know what I mean? An example is that a breadtuber called Ethan is Online, who is generally a dumb bitch, brought up two artists in his terrible art video. Both alcoholics, both crazy people, and seems to think that one is a good alcoholic and one is a bad one, because the bad alcoholic makes pieces about like people in nature, and because some of the people are white, which it's a bad thing, even though one of the examples that he shows is clearly Native Americans who aren't white at all. He picked the image to show in the background of his video and he doesn't even picked the wrong one.
His work is clearly restricted, uninspired. It's the same subjects over and over again. White people hanging out outside. All right, man. He even made the Egyptians white. Interesting. Robert.
The image that he picked in the background disagrees with what he said. They're not all white people in those paintings. But then he says like, oh, Jackson Pollock is like the good alcoholic because he's not a conservative, so his art's good. The other art's bad because I looked up the person on Wikipedia and they have opinions that I don't like, so their art is bad. Imagine when you see an artwork or a song or something, and you, in order to figure out whether you like it or not, you don't engage with it and just come to the conclusion. You go and look up the person's background so that you can artificially make up good or bad points about the artwork or whether or not you're allowed to like it. What a stagnant and horrible viewpoint that does not allow you to grow as an artist whatsoever. For example, I hate some of Stephen King's work, but I really love some of them. As a person, the way that he presents himself online, he has a serious case of Trump derangement syndrome and is one of the lamest people in the world ever. But it's not going to change that I genuinely love some of his books. For example, Green Mile, Dark Tower. I use the experience of reading these books to further my own creative journey. I take notes on some of the stuff that I love, and I genuinely praise these books because the contents of the books are really good. I would be a much poorer artist for it if I just decided to force myself to dislike these particular books because I don't like the king in the way that he presents himself as a person online. I just ignore it. I'd only acknowledge what he's saying if I was directly talking about him as a person and not really talking about his works, or if he was the type of person who directly put his own political opinions directly into his work in such a way that it stuck out so badly that I would need to address it. Kind of in the way that I talk about the CW, like Batwoman. When I say things like, oh, she basically faces the camera and talks about her opinion on like white people or whatever, I'm talking about it in that way. The author and the people who are making these things are injecting their opinions into it in such an obvious way that it's basically like they're talking to the audience instead of focusing on the fictional thing that's happening on screen and how to make that as good as it can be. Another example, I've done a video on the Paranormal Activity series. They are terrible, but they're not political. I think my video was like an hour long, an hour of just talking about how the media itself is bad because the writing is bad. It's nothing to do with politics. That series never had politics in it. Another example, I like Silent Hill. I think that Silent Hill 2 is legitimately one of the best horror games of all time, and you can fight me on that, but I could make like a 5-hour video about how the games 1 to 8 in the franchise started good and then had a massive decline, and I would not bring politics up at all in that entire 5 hours because it has nothing to do with it. Media itself, you can criticize it without looking at what the opinions of the people behind the scenes are if it's not relevant to the story. And especially if you're trying to grow as an artist, one of the worst things that you can do for yourself is trap yourself into the politics game.
When somebody shows you who they are, believe them.
But let's be honest, if this was just a video about art and how it relates to politics, no one would really care that much. Maybe it would get a feature on EFAP and they would talk about it, but people would then just move on and not give a shit and brush it off as just a breadtuber doing what a breadtuber does. But the reason why this became such a behemoth is because IPOS went after some random nice people on the internet in such a vicious way that it truly boggles the mind. Long story short, he uses the rapist thing that I talked about in the beginning as like setting the tone for what he thinks about conservatives. The people that he brings up are just normal peoples, a lot of whom I actually quite like. For example, Donut Operator. Donut Operator is a man who breaks down police footage to explain what is okay, what is not okay, and how to spot these things for a layman. Him breaking down the proper context is very, very important for keeping people from being misinformed and thinking that, you know, certain interactions with the police are racist or certain things are justified or not justified because of some sort of like very fiery headline that's trying to incite some sort of division among people. It's very important what Donut Operator does, and he is quite entertaining. However, because he was a cop, a lot of people who for some reason have a hate boner for anything around that whatsoever is going to label him as a horrible far-right Nazi, what's the term, propaganda person. And listen, I don't like the government. I like Killdozer, so I'm not gonna try and act like everything the police do is a good thing, but the basic premise of an everyday cop, like Donut Operator for example, is that they're just a good person trying to do their job, and the super left-wing cop hate is definitely not the same as my Killdozer boner, you know what I'm talking about? He also labels some commentary channels as conservative gun tubers just for their association loosely with like maybe being friends with people that he doesn't like and taking pictures with people that he doesn't like. Like that's how far this reaches, that the halo reach is like very wide. For example, this person called Oompaville, if you take a look at his channel, it just seems like a commentary channel. It seems like he doesn't make any political statements at all. Like, what did he do that was wrong? Leave him alone. I don't even care about who this is, I just leave him alone. Also, the main crux of it is that he made an attack piece on Wendigoon, who seems like one of the nicest people in the entire sphere of not only horror, but creators on YouTube. He's a super class act, he's just a really nice kind of guy. But apparently Wendigoon is an evil person because he talks about God, and he likes guns. And he's a nice, normal person. That makes him a bad person. One of the examples was that Wendigoon once spoke about how I think his grandpa or something did a bad thing and got into money through ill-begotten means, but then his family like turned around and found God, and Wendigoon uses this as like one of the stories for his moral faith kind of thing. It's like a very wholesome story, but apparently something that I've noticed is that bread tubers have a hate boner for God, and I have absolutely no idea why. I'm saying this as someone who went through my edgy atheist phase when I was a teenager. I do not know where the hate boner from God comes from with these people. I cannot tell you. It is so confusing. It feels like they use an excuse, and I'm not talking about religious extremism. I get criticizing religious extremism because obviously that's whack, and there's hate preachers in any religion, and calling them out is a good thing, yes. That's not what I mean that they're talking about. I mean these people genuinely hate God as a concept. Is that why he hates Late Night with the Devil? Because it has the devil in it? Like, in a good story, you can read it multiple ways and it still makes sense. You can watch Late Night with the Devil and view the devil as a secular metaphor for the shadow, like in a Carl Jung kind of sense, you know what I mean? In like this represents the immoral parts of your brain and the bad things that you've done as a human. It doesn't have to be supernatural or like religious in any connotation. For example, I also hate the boring exorcism movies that are just jump scare fests, and then they have like the demon as scary blob, and then you pull out a cross and then it's the end of the thing. Like there's no other sort of like human aspect to it whatsoever. Those movies suck too, and you can easily paint them in a religious context. It's not that the movie has the devil in it and the devil is bad and I'm like, haha, I clap on screen because devil bad. It's that the writing in the movie is genuinely really good, and you can use the devil as a representation in a literary sense for anything that you can consider like a bad thing, or anything that your character considers a bad thing. It's a very nice, in-depth way to talk about things in a well-written story. I don't know why these people genuinely just brush it off as like it's a Christian movie, like, and even if it was a Christian movie, if it's a well-written movie, I'm still gonna like it. I don't know what's wrong about that. I kind of view the devil as like the tarot card representation because it's like more complicated and it can come across in different aspects of life but still relate to people, you know what I mean? No, I'm not a white girl crystal astrology person, I just have tarot cards because I think they're cool. I like Stardust Crusaders. Anyways, if this video was genuinely about bad conservative horror, that would be totally fine. Because yes, political content of all kinds can be total shit from all sides. There's a cartoon called Mr. Bircham that's supposed to be like an anti-woke cartoon, but the clips that I've seen look like shit. I'm not gonna force myself to try and watch it and like it because it's like an opposite to the left-wing version of these cartoons. Bad content's bad content. I'm not gonna do what I've been criticizing these guys for doing and like find out that, oh, maybe I agree with some of these opinions, so I must like it. I must force myself to like this show. It's a shit show that it looks like it anyway, and it deserves the criticism that it can get. Obviously, there's differences in the context, like left-wing content gets mainstream approval and mainstream praise. It has like a ton of budget because of like artificially supporting the party, and a lot of conservative media is more independent because they don't really have the same level of support, but still, I can look at it in that context and still say that it's not worth watching. It looks like shit. So if this video was a deconstruction of bad writing in conservative media that is genuinely bad writing, and it promotes like good housekeeping around creative projects and how to write in a way that it makes more sense, that would be great. That's needed. But since this is a bread tuber, he's not going to do that. He's going to make shit up because they don't like someone, and therefore that person's work has to be bad, even though that's not really necessary either, because like I said, there's plenty of examples of bad conservative content if you look around a bit, sure. Any political side has bad content in it, so you could have just found some genuinely terrible conservative content and criticized it and then went about your day. But this is why it's, for them, it's about being on the correct team and not criticizing art, because like I said, if he was genuinely interested in criticizing art, he could have done so. He then goes on a really long rant about how people didn't like the video he made where he had a Hills Have Eyes analysis where he turns it into a political piece about how brown people are the victims and the movie is racist. People told him that this is a bad take because it is, and he says that that isn't actually what he said, and he tries to like retroactively gaslight people into thinking that they watched a different video. He never like shows clips of the actual video that he made. He never like goes back and clips himself and quotes himself from that video and says, okay, this is what I said here, now let me break that down. He just acts like he said something completely different. It reminds me of what's-his-face, Eye Patch Wolf. He did a video where he claimed that the cannibals in a piece of media are racist because black people, and it's like when he looks at the cannibals he just sees black people, and that's bad. So when the black people are cannibals in the media, that means that they're actually the good guys because they're black. It doesn't matter that they're cannibals. And then when he got criticism for it because he's retarded, it quietly got removed from his video and he didn't mention it because he couldn't keep up with the flack that he was catching for being a retard. It's basically the orcs are people of color take, and as one of them peoples of colors, I absolutely hate anyone who agrees with that retard opinion. He's complaining about how the video ruined everything and he thinks that he deserves views and no critique on his videos and that people are just racist and they don't understand what he's saying. When it's like, you clearly have an unhealthy view of black people. I think that you are the one who needs to take a big thonk about that, sir. If you see an ugly monster in fiction and you see a black person, as that's your problem. You can't turn around and project and blame other people for it. It is your racism, and you are not going to ruin my enjoyment of media because you have issues. Log off.
Maybe you should try getting a job.
He also compared the evil white people in the Hills Have Eyes movie to Kyle Rittenhouse, who he thinks is a murderer and a disgusting person, even though Kyle was clearly just defending himself. Should I make a video about that? Because there are genuinely so many people who still believe Kyle is a horrible murderer for just defending himself as a teenager. Like, the hate towards this kid is absolutely insane. Should I do a video on that? I did a 5-hour video on Johnny Depp. I can do a video on Kyle Rittenhouse. iPos also says that people got mad at him for just recapping the plot of the movie, when that doesn't seem like what he did. He's clearly talking in his video, he's making some very bold claims about the racism or whatever in the movie. He's not talking about the movie. But again, he's trying to gaslight people and be like, well, you just misunderstood what I was saying and you heard something else, that's your problem. And if you disagree with me, you're just a conservative who's plotting my downfall. Like, again, I'm still waiting for the topic of the title to come up. Like, you genuinely haven't talked about bad conservative horror yet. You've just been like flailing around like a bitch. He genuinely acts like if you criticize him, you don't like subtext in movies and you're dumb. If you criticize him, you're one of those like normies who goes to the theater to watch like a bunch of jump scares, like a bunch of teenagers watching a jump scare and then being like, ooh, so scary, and then immediately forgetting it as like Skibbity Toilet plays in their brains. That's what you are to him if you disagree with his take on subtext in general. You can't have your own opinion on subtext. He also then says, if you don't like what I said about The Hills Have Eyes, you're overreacting because the people in the movie aren't real. So what I said isn't reflective of real people in real life, so you shouldn't take my opinion so hard.
And also, it isn't me saying that I think that these things are good in real life. Obviously. We are talking about fiction here. The Hills Have Eyes never happened. Wes Craven made that up. These are not real people. And I know I normally don't have to go that basic with what I'm saying, but in this instance, I guess it does have to be said. Because near weekly for over 2 years, at least one person has insinuated to me that I supposedly think people's flesh should literally be eaten off their bodies because they can afford a camper. And I won't name names. But the thing that really hit me the hardest is that when I decided to stop reading comments and just tried to distract myself by scrolling on Twitter, and on my For You page, I found a thread of mutuals openly making fun of me for my failure of the video amongst themselves.
You are stupid. Yes, I know, that's insulting, but it's also the truth.
Which is very, very funny, because bread tubers are the first people who say that the media that you consume reflects you as a person, and make a big stink about how if you like video games that have women portrayed in a way that bread tubers don't like, you're a misogynist and you want to kill women in real life. Like, just for him to say that in such a condescending tone, this is one of the dumbest people ever. It's so stupid. If they don't like the media that you like, you're morally wrong for liking it, and it shows that you're evil in real life. You like the movie Joker? You're an incel. And if you respond to that, they say, why do you care so much? Why does this affect you personally? This reminds me of another bread tuber called the Queer Kiwi, who made a video about conservative memes where she just shows the meme, says that she doesn't understand it, laughs like a brainless bitch, and then does it again for like 10 minutes. I don't understand who watches this video unironically and thinks that it's good. She's genuinely one of the most brain-dead people I've ever seen in my entire life, and I only know her from this one video. She brought up some meme about the grooming gangs in Europe and then doesn't know what it means because she doesn't know what the grooming gangs are, and then acts like it's the meme's fault that she's retarded. Fucking brainlets. Like, I understand if a meme is genuinely nonsensical, like there's a reason why a lot of woke Twitter memes, there's like a way that they write so much garbage that you genuinely don't know what's happening because there's just so much shit on screen and like you don't want to read a novel, you know, because that's not the point of a meme. So I understand reacting to a meme that is genuinely nonsensical and saying that you don't understand it. That is a fine criticism. To have a meme that clearly has some sort of backstory to it and then not putting any effort in to try and figure it out because your brain works too slow and then just going, but how does that affect you personally? Like, one of the things that IPOS says is that Wendigoon claims he created the Boogaloo Boys and that he actually didn't create them because it's a hate group and Wendigoon must have been in middle school at the time. I'm a bit confused at what he's trying to say, because I think he sounds like he's making Wendigoon sound like a bad guy, but I think I'm not getting that tone. Well, basically, when Wendigoon was super young, he saw a funny meme and then it called Boogaloo Boys, and then it devolved into nonsense and he didn't like where it was going, so he kind of withdrew from it, and he is an adult now who has different opinions than when he did when he was a brain dead child. So what is the problem exactly? He also, IPOS genuinely says that wearing a Hawaiian shirt is a racist dog whistle, which is so unhinged that I don't even have to comment on that. But the thing that annoys me the most is that he says that even though Wendigoon is a part Native American, he doesn't have the right to express it or use Native American things in his work because he acts too white. This is one of the most racist things that I have personally seen, and I have seen it myself as well, like with my own skin tone.
Name came from his cultural connection to Native lore through his grandfather's side. But I can assure you that unless you were on the reservation itself, that actual Native culture has no aspect in the general lives of the people around here, other than the racist trinkets that depict them. And as I said a moment ago, the Wendigo is Algonquin, who are nowhere close to the vicinity of the Cherokee, who are in the southern Appalachia region, and throughout the lower sections of Middle America. The Algonquin people are Canadian, and a little bit Northern American. To insinuate that he can use the Wendigo name by citing local cultural native customs is completely absurd to a person who lives in the same general vicinity as he does. It is obvious that he just thought Wendigos were cool, and has come up with some seemingly strange backstory lie that is easily proven to not be true, unless, you know, his grandfather is Algonquin and just moved to Tennessee. But if that were the case, I don't know why he wouldn't just come out and say that by now. And the reason why he doesn't is because it isn't true. There's a lot of bizarre, religious-like mythologizing around his past that I particularly hate. Like it always being said that his interest in cryptids and horror began with oral folktales in Appalachia that are passed down and told to children. I assure you, as someone who lives near him and has for most of my life, this is total bullshit, and is some weird, false, cultural, imaginative idealization of the American South that is not actually true to the real Appalachia. They might as well claim that he was born on a fucking mountaintop.
If you want to express your culture and speak properly about it and do things that are good in life, you get accused of being white. As if you should act like a savage monster to fit what this leftist thinks that your skin tone should denote about you. Breadtubers think so lowly of us that they think that we're all animals, and if you act too white for them, aka like a decent human being who speaks proper English, you shouldn't be allowed to talk or access your culture. Wendigoon has the right to his own cultural background, and you can't take that away from him just because you're so racist that you want him to act like a hills have eyes savage rapist because that's how you view all non-white people. That is not Wendigoon's problem. That is your problem. I sound really fucking angry right now whenever this comes up, but I have to really stress, I genuinely need you to know that these people are some of the most racist people I have ever come into contact with in my life. Like, I have been to small towns in my childhood where I faced genuine racism from like a redneck small town kind of perspective, and even they were not as racist as these people are. They genuinely think that they can take our cultural backgrounds away from us because they think we're not falling in line with their racist ideal. I need you to understand how fucked up that is. Please, I am so sick of this. My culture is mine to express, and you have no right to think that you can strip it away from me because I don't act like how you think I should.
You are stupid.
There's a million different things that IPOS got wrong and a million different little stupid things that he did, but that's why I've linked some responses that I like in the description. I've linked Longbone, I've linked Harmful Opinions, I've linked Aiden Paladin, so that you can see all of those things. Maybe you can make a video on the stuff that I didn't cover and link me to it, that'd be cool. But I'm just doing what I do, and I wanted to talk about the stuff that particularly stood out to me, and if you had fun, I hope so. Log off.